Okay, we're starting to get into the hard work of actually passing someone's guard using a body lock. Let's start with some reflections on the idea of the hierarchy of positions. The passing method that we're going to look at now uses one of the very best body lock positions in that hierarchy that we looked at earlier. This is where we get two of our legs on one of our training partner's shins. This creates a situation where your opponent has minimal connection to you, but you have maximal connection to them. It creates a real asymmetry and connection in your favor. Let's have a look at it right now. Okay, we start off in a front body lock, just in like so, and we pull the man in and return his shoulders to the mat. We're going to use our standard method of operating, which involves us taking our opponent's butterfly hook out of our shin, just like so. Now, instead of immediately stepping over, we're going to bring our knee in and pin it like so. I'm just going to turn our body in a little bit. Yes. And then from here, I'm going to take my trail leg, I'm going to kick back, and I'm going to capture Placido's shins with both of my thighs. Do you see what's happening here, guys? One of his shins is captured in front of both of my legs. This means that Placido has no effective connection to my legs. This is not a half guard situation. He does not have a hook on my leg. Rather, I'm connected to him through the body lock, but he has no effective connection to me. Okay? I don't care what he does with the other leg. Most people put it on the back. And at this point, they're probably forming frames with their upper body, etc., etc. You have their leg well pinned. From here, I'm going to take my elbow on top of his thigh. I'm going to step up, and I'm going to take my knee, my right knee towards my left knee. So just switch. Now I go to step over his leg. And I block it right in here, and I switch my head across to the other side. Placido has no effective connection to me. He's probably going to put his other leg on my back, try and hold as best he can. And then from this position, I'm just going to turn, scissor my legs, and bring my knee to my training partner's tailbone. So when he tries to put me back in guard, the body lock and the knee position makes it very, very difficult indeed. I'm chest down to my opponent, so if he bridges, I can hold his body in place and get to a good strong grip. Now as he goes to desperately frame and push me off, I just take my hand, punch through, lift my second arm out, capture the hips, and come into a strong pass and control the head. So once again, we start off in place and put him down on the floor. From this position here, I start by coming out and sprawling so that his foot comes off my body. Now I bring my left knee in, I bring my second leg back, and I capture my training partner's leg. When he tries to move away, the body lock makes it very, very difficult. From here, I come forward with my head, one knee replaces the other, and as a result, I'm able to step over my training partner's leg. As soon as we make the step, the head switches to the other side. Now, my knees shift and point towards his tailbone. As I scissor my legs, I beat his right leg. I don't chase the head. I chase the hips first and put my knee next to his tailbone. So when he goes to put me back in guard, it's awfully, awfully difficult. You can play with head position here. Most of the time, I have my legs on one side and my head on the other. But if I see him pushing my head around and framing and doing it the other way, I'm not afraid just to put my head down on this side too, provided I'm walking into his hips. So when he goes to put me back in guard, it's awfully, awfully difficult. Now from here, as he pushes in frames, I take my hand, pass it through his arm frames, limp out, block the hips, and pass. One more time from a different angle. Starting position, we put him down. I need to clear out my training partner's left foot, so I scroll down like so. I bring my knee in, turn, extend my leg so I can capture the foot and shin. He tries to push me away. Difficult. I step over the knee, switch my head, switch my knees, and from here, scissor, bring my knee forward, and finish up in this very strong passing position. He goes to shake me off. It won't be easy. I thread my hands through, limp my arm out, pin, and finish. Very, very useful method of passing. Now, let's go on to what is arguably the method of front body lock guard passing that my students use more than any other method. There's more opportunities for this method to be used. That's why it's the one we use most of the time. It's a damn good method, very, very reliable, works very well. And there's so many opportunities for it, it turns out that in practice, this is the one we use most of the time. Let's have a look at it now. From the same situation that we've been looking at, we're in a front body lock and our opponent has double inside position. I'm showing a lot of stuff, guys, on double inside position because that's the position you're usually going to have to work from. It's the most common position, so I want you to be good. Even though it's not the preferred position, it is the most common. That's why we're spending most of our time here. So, from a situation where I put my training partner down, everything starts the same way, guys. It always starts with that sprawl, an asymmetric sprawl where one knee is high and one leg is low, and as a result we can negate the effect of our training partner's second butterfly hook. Then from here we try to use movement to lower his knee. Very often we use our elbow to help and assist get the knee down, and then from here we step over our training partner's leg. Now once we make the step over, we turn and get our head to move in the opposite direction. Typically our elbow comes up north a little bit, just like so. Now let's change our angles a little bit. Do you see what the problem here is here, guys? Placido has a good connection to my leg. Essentially what I've done here is I put myself in half guard with a body lock. That's essentially what's happened here. Unlike the previous move where you were trapping his shin from the front with two of your legs, now he's got a pretty good connection to you. So it won't be easy for you, other leg up, it won't be easy for you just to take your leg out because he's hooking your leg in place. Okay, so a question starts to naturally develop here. Well, what do we do at this point? How are we going to extract this leg? Well, you're going to see people give all kinds of advice. You're going to see people say, oh, just turn your knee down and pommel your leg out. But when you use this method, the other leg hooks your leg and causes all kinds of problems. A much better method is to use a knee sweep with, in this case, my left knee. I take my knees and I turn them towards his knees and I walk and I use my left knee to block his knee. What I don't want is his leg out here, perpendicular to his hips. I want my left knee to walk his left knee down so it's straight, parallel with his body. The more perpendicular his leg, the stronger his connection, and I can't unhook my leg. So I use my left knee to come down to his knee and I walk his leg down. Okay? So as we lock up on that initial body lock, from here, this is our start position. Look how I take my knee down to his knee. So I go from the hip down to the knee and I start walking across the body. And as a result, I can easily walk past his foot. From this situation, I take my leg and hook it back, scissoring my legs. Then from here, my knee comes out. Second knee goes here to my training partner's tailbone, and we're past. This method is at its best when your opponent keeps a butterfly hook with the opposite leg. So once again, we start off, basic position like so. And I step over, butterfly hook. From here, I bring my head across. I bring my knee down to his knee. And I use my left knee to sweep his leg out. So when he goes to follow me with his right leg, it's very, very difficult. And I can walk out. Off the walk, I scissor my legs. So when he goes to lift me with his butterfly hook, those scissored legs make it very hard for him to follow.
When he goes to explode with his hips, he's still in a full body lock. And it's very easy for me to control his hip dynamics. When I say explode, I mean shrimping. Very, very difficult to move. Then I just put my knee in front of his tailbone. When he goes to push me off, it's tough. He goes to frame. We bring our hands inside. We limp our arm out, block, and pass. Okay? So let's have a look at that again with our butts facing the camera. I'm sorry, guys. It's the only way for you to see our leg work. You're welcome. My apologies. I'm sure Pascal's getting a whole new bunch of fans now. So, from here, we go in and lock up. We put the man down, shoulders on the mat. From here, I start the action of coming out to the side. I sprawl, just like so. I do a good job of stepping over my training partner's leg, but he does a good job of keeping that butterfly hook in. I bring my knee in, I switch my head, and then I knee sweep. My left knee comes down to his knee. Don't try to do it up here by the hip. Bring it down to the knee. And then I walk across his body and I sweep his knee along. Now, as he tries to follow me with his right foot, I've taken his knee too far, and so I can easily walk the leg out. His only hope now is his left butterfly hook. But when I scissor my legs, you just step out of it. Now I correct my body. He goes to shrimp. The body lock won't let it happen. I put my knee next to his tailbone. He tries to move out. Tries to frame under my head. Slides through the frame. Limp your arm. He tries to put me back in guard. Block the hips. And correct yourself. Now, let's show it from an angle that doesn't involve our asses. From a situation where we start off like so. I put his shoulders on the mat. That never really changes. From here, I step over. That never really changes. I switch my head. That doesn't change very much. From here, what does change is he's got his butterfly hook in. He's got a good hook on my right leg with his right leg. So if I just try to take my leg out, it feels impossible. So I've got to do it the right way. Plus, do you see how when I bring my knee down to your knee, what it does to your right hook? Mm-hmm.
It brings it farther away from his leg.
Exactly. Now, I step and walk. I turn my hips just enough that I can walk myself free. Placido goes to lift me. It's very, very tough. That scissoring action beats his legs. He goes to put us back in guard. Body lock makes it very, very difficult. Now I just walk, bring my knees to the tailbone. He goes to frame, cut through the frame, changing your shoulder angle, as we talked about earlier in the video, and there's your pin. Now, as I said earlier, guys, statistically, that's probably the method we use most of the time. Is it mechanically the strongest? Is it tactically the most efficient? Nope. But it occurs in a situation which is the most common. It's a damn good method, and it works against the most common scenario that you ever get placed in body locking, so it's the one we use the most. Make sure you get good at it. Now, it's time for us to move on to another very, very effective way of passing from the body lock. In the previous move, the leg scissor, this was best when you stepped over your opponent's leg and he retained a half butterfly guard. That's when it's at its best. The method we're going to be looking at now is best when your opponent switches from half butterfly to a regular half guard. This method is often used by an immensely talented student of mine, Nicky Ryan. He's the best I ever saw at this method. Let's have a look at how it gets used in operation. Okay, Placido, let's do this with your head facing this way. So you get a good angle from the start. Okay, front body lock. He's got both his feet inside. Not the best position, but it's the most common position. So that's where we're going to start. That's where we're going to spend most of our time. So here we are. We get waist exposure. As a result, we're able to get a good lock. I'm demonstrating with the 10-finger lock because my wrists aren't feeling so good this morning.
but you guys can choose whatever you want with your various grips because you're young and healthy. So from here, I drive my training partner's shoulders down to the mat. We use the same step over method that we always use. No changes there, guys. You probably, I'm sounding like a broken record at this point. I start to sprawl like so. Then I step over my training partner's knee, and then we head switch across to the other side. But this time, Placido has elected to go to half guard. Yeah, it took him a while to figure that one out, didn't it? My God.
I got variations you don't even know about, dog.
Do they pay these people? My God. So here we are. We're in half guard. Now let's contrast that with the previous move where Placido took your left foot, buddy. Placido was here in a half butterfly guard. Now perhaps you've been successful with the leg scissor method, and your opponent fears it now. So he's smart. He's learning. So he goes, let me poke half guard. Now my opponent can't scissor his legs. Let's understand why the previous move won't work now. When I come down and use the previous move, I can't leg scissor because he's on top of my leg. If he had a half butterfly hook, yeah, now I can walk forward and go over his leg. But when he's got full half guard, his left leg holds my leg in place. So the previous move is no longer going to work. Okay? Now, from here, I've got to get my left foot inside his thigh. Problem. My head position makes it quite difficult to do so. So what we're going to do is we're going to sprawl down his body, and we're going to switch our head position to the inside. And then from here, I'm going to look to take my foot inside my training partner's leg like so, using my shoelaces. You can come a surprisingly long way forward with your head and get your foot inside his. Now from here, we're just going to use the pressure of my left foot to hold him in place, and I'm going to take my leg, my right leg in this case, up off the mat and bring my knee towards the floor. As Placido tries to move away from us, the body lock holds him in place. Now from here, I use my second foot on his knees. To kick out, he's presumably going to be locked on tight to my ankle. We're going to take our foot and pry our leg out. I point my toes to give him less purchase on my foot, and as a result, we get a smooth pass. As he tries to put us back in guard, it's very, very difficult with the body lock in place. As he goes to frame on me, we're always looking to get inside position and lock our opponent in. So once again, we start off, body lock in place. One thing never really changes, the opening gambit. We step over the top. This time he locks a half guard on me, so that when I make my switch, the previous leg scissor method is not really going to be there. So I bring everything down and I put my shoulder on my training partner's belly button. From a position like so, it's not so tough for us to take our foot and put it inside our training partner's leg, shoelaces over. It's important when we do this kind of action that we find that good position on our training partner's leg. And as a result, we can bring his knees down to the floor and get our knee down to the mat. As our knee comes down to the mat, we're in the perfect position to kick out. We use a foot on his knee, legs down to the floor. He goes to put us back in guard. Body lock makes it very, very difficult. I can't stay in a sit-out position. From here, we turn everything down, chest down, knees in place. My feet come up to my buttocks. So when he goes to hook my legs, very difficult. If I leave my legs out, I can start stepping over them, causing problems. So from here, feet retract, he goes to hook. It's difficult. Then we just walk our knees in, we get our knees to the tailbone, everything in place. It's probably going to be a very hardly fought battle at this point. 2-3 seconds and he's fighting like a demon. Hold on to your body lock. And when he frames, cut through the middle, limp arm out, and pass. Okay, once again, this time from a different angle. I notice he locks a full half guard. We bring everything down the body, shoulder goes in place, and then from here, we're in perfect position to start getting our training partner's knees down towards the mat, walking out like so.
once the knees start coming down to the floor, we're always looking to get our foot on top of our training partner's leg, just like so. As my foot comes in, he tries to hold us off. Look how we just focus on a good push with my left foot so that my knee can come down to the mat. As he tries to hold us off, my left foot pushes on top, bottom leg, whichever one you see. He goes to put us back in guard. Head switches over. Knees come in. Knee finds the tailbone. Switch through. And pass for the finish.
Now we're working our way through our most effective and favorite ways of passing from a front body lock. We're looking at situations where our opponent has 2 feet inside, the most common situation, the one that you have to become very, very familiar with. Even though it's not the most desirable situation, it is the most likely from which you'll have to operate by a landslide. So that's where we're putting most of our attention. Now, guys, you've probably noticed as we've gone through these techniques, there's kind of like a clockwork pattern to them. The idea of lowering our opponent's knee, stepping over the knee, and then switching our head position across to the other side. An obvious question for you guys to be asking is, what if the pattern breaks down and I can't step over my training partner's knee? You have to have a solution to this, okay? Here's one of our favorite solutions. This is a knee cut. From any situation where I'm working with Placido and I get to my body lock and I put his shoulders down on the mat, you guys know what the modus operandi is. The idea is that we go into a sprawl, we step over the knee, and then we get closure by moving our head across to the other side, and we look for our opponent's reaction. Nope. Does he stay with a butterfly hook, or does he convert to half guard? You don't control that part of the equation, so don't worry about that. That's up to him. You should be able to pass in either instances, and we've shown you good means of doing so in both cases. But let us look now at the situation where you can't get over your opponent's knee. Okay, it's going to happen. It happens in particular when you go with tall opponents, taller than you. Okay, but it doesn't have to be the case. Some guys are just good at shifting their hips. They've got good mobility, good discipline with their knee position, and for whatever reason you're having a hard time stepping over the knee, you've got to have a backup plan. And our favorite backup plan from there is to cut our knee through the gap that they create by giving you that awkward knee position where you can't step over. So let's have a look at it right now.
From the situation where we lock up with our training partner, we put his shoulders down to the mat. We are trying to get over our training partner's knee, but for whatever reason, it's a struggle. Okay, and the knee is still there in front of your knee, like so. In these situations, very often he's trying to use his other leg on your back, and you're like, it's hard for you to step over. Whenever we see this kind of thing going on, we're going to come up towards him. Keep your knee in front.
My right knee, right?
Your right knee in front. Now, from here, I'm going to take my head and I'm going to bring my head forward and I'm going to tripod. It's important that I bring my knee up to his buttocks first. Otherwise, it's very awkward and you feel very clumsy when you go to tripod. Now, even though I can't beat his knee, I can bring my foot out and reposition my head. All I'm going to do is bring my knee up, just like so. And then from this position, as my head goes forward, down towards the mat, I'm just going to take my knee higher than his knee and pass it through the gap that I've created. As a result, I can cut my knee across in front of his knee. When he goes to hold me off, my head position makes it awfully difficult. And as a result, we can sit down to a hip and then rapidly convert our head to the opposite side and come back into a squared position. From here, my knee chases my training partner's tailbone. So when he goes to shrimp and put us back in guard, it's awfully difficult. And we just walk our body in. As he goes to frame on the upper body, we cut through our training partner's frames, limp our arm out, and come down into a controlling pin. So let's have a look at that again. We get to our body lock, and from here, we put him down. From this position, look how initially we're trying very hard to use our standard method of stepping over, but for whatever reason, it's proving awfully difficult. That's usually because our opponent takes his second leg and puts it on our back so that he can shrimp and move more actively and keep that knee in front. Your knee should be high, Placido.
My right knee.
Yeah. Now, from here, we bring our knee up and we're in a good position now to tripod. As we tripod, my knee comes over my training partner's hip. Now we're in the perfect position to put our head down towards the floor. It's like so. So when he goes to frame and push, your head position makes it awfully difficult. Now from here, I push down with my knee. He can lock around my ankle. It means nothing at this point. We put a foot on either bottom or top knee. I point the toes of my right foot so he has less purchase on my foot. And then from here, my foot comes out and I reposition my head across to the other side. As he goes to put me back in guard, that tight waist effect makes it awfully difficult. Avoid the temptation to stay in a sit through. Always walk your legs together, knees off the mat, and come down into our favorite position with the knee down by the tailbone. As he goes to put us back in guard, it's awfully difficult. From here, he posts, my hands cut through his last remaining frames, and then we turn through to the hips. Then from here, we block and pass. Just going to show you with our buttocks facing the camera so you can see the leg work. Body lock in place. From here, I tried hard to step over the top, but I'm having an awfully difficult time. I notice, however, that there's an opening because he's taken out his butterfly hook. So from this position, look how we come forward with the head, and then we come up into a tripod position so that my knee is higher than his hip. That makes for an easy cut through our training partner's legs. My head position and knee position make it very hard for him to get away. My foot goes for a simple kick out. I point the toes of my right foot, and as a result, we get a nice little pass. From here, foot goes out, head comes to the other side. He goes to put us back in guard. Walk our knees off the mat. My knee chases the tailbone, and as a result, he goes to shrimp. Very difficult. Chest to chest, body lock in place. That body lock glues your chest to his and your hips to his hips. So every time he goes to shrimp, very hard to get away. Now we bring the second hand across, limp the arm, face the hips. He goes to put us back in guard. Goes to put us back in guard, hand locks. And here's the pin for the finish. So this is a very useful way of getting around one of the most common problems associated with body lock guard passing, and that's an inability to step over the knee. Then all we do is tripod and slide the other knee across into the gap that our opponent's created and get a nice pass. Now we're looking at body lock guard passing. Initially, we showed you moves to control your opponent and just directly pass his guard. This move and the previous move are looking at situations where the methodology is becoming problematic. Okay, in the previous move, I couldn't get over my opponent's knee, and as a result, we had to use a knee cut method. So in a sense, it was kind of like troubleshooting. Okay, I tried my body lock, it's not working, can't get over the knee. What do I do now? No problem, knee cut. The move we're about to look at now is a second example of troubleshooting. In the previous move, Placido put his leg on my back to facilitate moving away from me, and we knee cut. This time, Placido's like, I know what he's going to do. He's going to try to knee cut on me, so I'm going to keep my butterfly hook so he can't knee cut. Okay, and we're going to use a kick out. By far, the most common time you'll be using a kick out is when your opponent tries to sweep you. Remember, guys, he does have hooks in. He does have butterfly hooks, and you do have your hands locked, so you don't have much base with your upper body. So many of your opponents will take that butterfly hook to deny the knee cut, and they will try to elevate you over and sweep you. This is a very common thing. Your counter to this is a kick out. This turns out to be one of the more common methods of guard passing that my students employ, just because so many opponents try to kick you out. Have faith in something. You are controlling his hips with your body lock. It's actually pretty damn hard for him to sumigashi you. Inside your mind, when he goes to sweep you, your mind will be screaming at you, unlock your hands. You're going to get swept. Because all your life you've been told, if your hands are locked and your elbows are in, you have no base and you'll fall over. And now I'm telling you, nope, go against your instincts, keep your body lock and let your hips do the work. Okay? The phrase you'll hear me saying here is, keep your hips square to the mat. Let your hips provide the base, not your hands. Trust in your body lock, even when all of your instincts are telling you not to. Okay? So let's have a look at this now. We've got a talented opponent, and this is
not the first time he's come up against body locking. So he realizes he can't be naive and give simple knee cuts or things like this. So we put him down. That never changes. We come in, we step over, and we get over our training partner's knee. However, when we're in situations like this, we feel like our opponent has elected to keep his butterfly hook. There is a danger now as we go to work and switch our head position that he can put his hands on my elbows and from here lift with his foot and take me over. Okay? After all, your arms are tied up and you don't really have any ability to use them as a base of support. If your opponent succeeds in turning your hips and shoulders to face the ceiling, you will fall. So the whole key is to keep your hips facing square down to the mat. Your shoulders will turn a little bit, inevitably, as your opponent tries to sweep you, but not enough to turn you over. But the focus of your work is keeping your hips square, face down to the mat. Don't let them tip and face the ceiling. Okay? So, as we lock up on our training partner, and we get into our body lock, from here, when I feel him cover my elbows, it's no secret what's going to come next. When my training partner goes to lift me with the sumigaeshi, all we're going to do under this, I'm getting fat, aren't I, Placido? From here, as he goes to lift me, first, have faith in one thing. The body lock just makes it intrinsically difficult to hit the sumigaeshi, just without me even doing anything. Why? Because what he needs for an effective sumigaeshi is space between our hips, so that when he covers my elbows, his hips can go higher than mine and send me over. The body lock prevents that from happening. So right from the start, before anything even begins, it's actually pretty tough. So don't freak out when the guy covers your elbows and say, oh my God, I'm going to get swept, and just let go, okay? Have some faith. When your opponent covers the elbow and goes to sweep you, he's going to drop his right foot to the floor to push off the mat. Okay, it's the only way he can get power. If he doesn't keep his foot off the floor, go to lift me, buddy.
Impossible.
He'll never even move me. He's got the right power off the floor. Now, when he goes to do this, all we do is look in the direction of the sweep, and as my training partner goes to lift me, I just throw my body across, and my hips stay facing down to the mat. As he goes to move, we take our knees off the mat, knee goes to tailbone, and we go forward with our chest. When he goes to put his back in guard, very, very difficult. Now we cut through his frames, elbow comes out, face the hip, and pin. Okay. Let's do this one with our buttocks facing the camera. Okay, I get to my body lock position. I step over. If Placido keeps his right foot where it is and tries to sweep me, he'll never move me. This is just not going to happen. He has to push off the mat. When he does so, I just let my hip go, and then from here I take a hop with my left foot, and down we come. Now I transfer my head across to the other side. When he goes to put me back in guard, I walk to the tailbone, joining my right elbow and right knee, right up there by the tailbone. He goes to put me back in guard. Very, very difficult. And then from here, we finish. Let's have a look at that one more time from the same angle. From the body lock. If Placido keeps his right foot hooked around me in half guard and tries to lift me, my body lock will never let it happen. So he has to put his foot on the mat. As he goes to lift me, I just come up, and then I hop with my left foot. One hop, and sprawl. My hips are square down to the mat. I turn them even squarer. Feet come in, he goes to put me back in guard. The body lock controls him. Knee to buttocks, right there by the tailbone. He goes to frame, cut the frame in half, step around, head down, block the hips, and pin. So this is a very effective way to walk out of an attempted sumigaeshi. This is a common counter that opponents will be trying to use on you. You have to know how to deal with it. Now, we've been through a bunch of ways to employ body lock guard passing. Do you remember, fellas, from earlier in the video, we talked about two philosophies of body lock passing? Almost everything we've looked at so far has involved the philosophy of lowering our opponent's knee, okay? Of getting to a body lock, and then from here, making the knee come down. And as a result, we could start stepping over our training partner's leg and creating a lead leg and a trail leg, okay? But you will remember from earlier in the video that there were two philosophies of body lock guard passing, and the second one was this idea that we could go high over the obstacle of our training partner's knee. This kind of high hip method is actually one of the most effective forms of body lock guard passing. It has a very different dynamic from the methods we've looked at so far. It's a faster dynamic. It tends to be used in a quick bursting attack that gets you right past your opponent's legs in a very short time frame. It also involves the idea that you have to be able to surf over your training partner's knee. As it were, you have to just step over his knee with your hip and fix his knee inside your hip and surf over his knee. I'll demonstrate now. Okay, Placido's here in front of me, and we've managed to get waist exposure. That's always the first element behind any body lock. We've chosen, for the purpose of the move, I'm going to choose the 10-finger grip. Okay, I could have gone with other grips, but I'm demonstrating out of 10-finger, and I've done a good job of getting the shoulders down to the mat. Now, from here, this move is predicated on the idea of height. So I'm just going to bring my knee here to his tailbone. We are not sprawling down. That's not the idea. We want our body high, okay? So if he's in here, I just place my knee down. Now, I can take my knee up off the floor if I want. It's not essential, but you can do it if you wish. But what is essential, is that I take my knee and catch here on my training partner's knee. And that's going to make a strong resistant body, Placido. That's going to create a situation where I can surf on my training partner's body. So nothing is on the floor. Bring your knees to your chest. Nothing is on the floor. And I'm surfing on his legs. I bring my other foot up to my buttocks. And as a result, when I scissor, all I do is bring my leg back and place my knee down. That was the slow motion version of it, which required poor Placido to keep my big fat body open here. He was working overtime on that one. So we lock up on our training partner. My knee comes in. I step and hook onto his thigh, just like so. And then all I do is I just simultaneously move my head from one side to the other, and I give a little push off this leg, and I land across. I avoid the temptation to go chasing the head. Rather, we take our knee to the tailbone. So when he goes to put us back in guard, it's awfully difficult. And then from there, we work our way up north to the head and pin. So once again, we've got an opponent here in front of us. He's in guard. We're working plane. We see that waist exposure. We put his shoulder down. Now from here, that's our start position. My knee comes close to his tailbone, and then I just flare my leg up. Once I get that flare, I just step over his knee. Off that motion, okay, I just look the other way, and my knee goes straight to my training partner's tailbone. Okay, I'll demonstrate this from a variety of angles so you can see what's going on here. First angle is the least pleasant, with our butt straight to the camera. So, depends where you're at. From here, we lock up on a training partner. Look how my knee comes to tailbone. That starts everything, okay? If I try and do it from here, I'm out of balance. He lifts his leg and I fall. So I've got to keep my balance by bringing my knee in close. Now from here, I start that action of lifting, looking like a dog pissing on a tree. And then from here, second foot comes up, and then I just push off his defensive leg. And my knee finds my training partner's tailbone. Body lock situation facing me. Body lock, put him down. Knee comes in, and from here we just flare our legs and pin our training partner. Okay. As you gain in confidence, you can start faking one direction and going the other. So for example, Placido's here in front of me. We go through, we get our waist exposure. I fake, he goes defensively to move, and then I just come back in the opposite direction
and pass. Okay? One more time. We've got our opponent in front of us. As we go to play from guard position, we see that waist explosion. Typically, we start with two hands on our training partner's back. He goes to move away. It won't be easy. And then we go forward, boom, and catch. Now, from here, I just go straight over the top and pin. Okay? Now, guys, let's get used to this terminology, which you'll always hear me using when I teach body lock guard passing. Lead leg and trail leg. The lead leg is the one that steps over the knee. So when I lock up, boom, this is going to be my lead leg. When I go over, that creates a trail leg behind me. The lead leg is already passed. What I don't want is him grabbing my trail leg and holding me up. So I want my foot coming back to my buttocks. Then I just scissor. When he goes to catch my trail leg, it's so difficult. Okay? The whole idea behind these step over body locks is to use your lead leg to step over his knee, and then the whole finish is how you're going to get the trail leg to pass his guard. So it's one leg at a time. The good news is, you can't move his hips because you're body locking them. So you should be able to win most of these encounters. So here we are, hands up. From here, we go in and lock. I take my knee across. Now, as I hit that initial move, like the dog pissing on the tree, watch my trail leg. As I surf over Placido's knee, my second leg comes around the corner and scissors. Boom. So the trail leg is now passed. Knee comes down and we're in position. One more time. My left leg will be my trail leg. I step and pass. Left leg is lead. Right leg is trail. Now, what you'll see there, guys, is that this form of body lock guard passing has an entirely different feel and dynamic to it. It's not about that heavy sprawling pressure that we've been looking at so far in the video, where I'm dragging Placido's knee down towards the floor. I'm stepping over it. I'm coming up high. I'm putting feet inside and I'm working my way. It's got none of that. It's much more about a dynamic of surfing over his knee, where I get a hold of Placido and I surf over that knee into the pass. So it has a much faster, smoother dynamic, where essentially you put his knee into the pocket of your hip and your body just surfs over his hip. So even when his second leg hooks into me, look how I just beat it with the scissor and get to my pass position. Okay? Done well, this form of guard pass complements your heavy pressuring passes. It represents the second philosophy of body lock guard passing. The first philosophy was all about making the other guy's knee low and you pressuring over the knees. Now it's about making yourself high and surfing over your opponent's knee with that high hip scissor. Essentially, it's all that high hip action where I take my hip high in that weird dog pissing on a tree posture. Then I surf over his knee and my trail leg completes the pass. Used well, this will be a very, very effective addition to your body lock guard passing arsenal.
Now, we're looking at this notion of creating a lead leg and a trail leg, and as it were, going high, using a high hip action to go over our training partner's knee. So we're no longer focused on the notion of bringing his knee down. We're interested in bringing ourselves, in particular our hip, up. The basic dichotomy we're trying to bring here, guys, is that there's two philosophies of body lock guard passing. I can either make my opponent's knee go down lower, or I can make my own hip go higher. And both of them will get you over the obstacle of your opponent's knee. Your goal as a body lock guard passing specialist is to get good at both. It's okay that you favor one more than the other, that's natural, but you should be good at both, okay, in order to maximize your potential as a body lock guard passer. So in the previous move, my opponent had 2 butterfly hooks, okay, and we went straight into our high hip scissor right from there. Now, that's certainly an effective move, but as I'm sure you guys have picked up from this video already, my favorite way to go into body lock guard passing is to create a 2-on-1 shin situation, okay, where both of my legs are across my opponent's shin. That means that essentially I'm only fighting one of my opponent's legs. And in addition, not only am I only fighting one of his legs, I'm fighting his legs with almost no meaningful connection to my legs. So it greatly facilitates body lock guard passing in general. And it also greatly facilitates this high hip method of guard passing. So we're going to start off with Placido with 2 butterfly hooks. Okay, let's change our angle a little bit, Placido, so we're about 45 degrees to the camera, just right here. Okay, so Placido has the standard butterfly guard situation. We've seen that from here, if I bring my knee in close to the tailbone and then scissor my second leg back, then from here I can create the 2-on-1 scenario, okay, where both of my legs are on one of his shins. That means that Placido has very little in the way of effective connection to me. Okay, now from here we're going to hit that same high hip action, but it's going to be easier now because there's less connection on Placido's part. As always, we're focusing on getting our knee tight to the tailbone and then going into the high hip position. High hip is that weird position like a dog pissing on a tree, strong body Placido. And then from here I hook my knee over his knee so that my hamstring hooks onto him. And then from this position, this is going to be my lead leg. As I push off my training partner's leg, it's like I'm surfing over my training partner's legs. And then my lead leg pushes Placido's leg out of the way, and I just switch so that I have a secondary leg. And the secondary leg goes down to the tailbone, and we end up in the classic body lock passing position. Okay, so it's the same move as previously, but done from a superior position, which means it's a little bit easier. Now, guys, a word to the wise about the double shin situation. It is the best position in general to pass with body locks. You can't always get it, but if you can, use it, because it is a better position to work from. So once again, we lock up on a training partner, heads up, and he's working guard position. Initially, our hands are just kind of on his lower back, and then we quickly go in and get to that body lock. Now from here, I bring my knee in. I scissor the other leg back, and there's that 2-on-1 grip we're always looking for. Now I go into the high hip position, just like so. High hip, my legs are split 90 degrees in that weird dog pissing on a tree position, and I focus on getting my hamstring over his knee. Then from here, I just float by bringing my head forward, and there's the float position. From the float, my lead leg pushes his knee out of the way so that my trail leg can pass. And then from here, my knee comes down to the tailbone, and we get to our pin position. Plus, let's show it with our butts going directly to the camera. Apologies, so they can see the leg positioning. Okay, Placido's here in front of me. From here, hands up, Placido. From here, we lock up on our training partner. I bring my first knee in. Okay, so left knee comes in, pinches his foot to the buttock, then I scissor, and there's the classic 2-on-1 type situation on the leg. Now from here, I go high hip position. I catch his knee, and then everything just floats across to the other side. So I'm floating over his knee. Off that float, I just scissor, bring the knee into the tailbone, and there's our pass. Okay, now fellas, I'm just going to show you a very subtle point about head position whenever you hit the high hip method. Okay, The first time you drill this move, you might be frustrated by this. I'm just going to demonstrate it plus out of a basic high hip situation. Okay, getting the knee in the center, that's easy. Getting the high hip position, that's pretty easy. But what screws people up is when they go to make the jump, it all crashes for this reason. Just make a strong body position. If I don't move my head and I try to do it from here, it feels like you kind of don't make the move happen at all. What I want to do, watch my head and chin. I bring my chin over the opposite shoulder. So my head goes from here to here. And that's what enables me to float and surf over Placido's knee. Then from here, I just scissor my leg back and place my knee in. Okay, so it's that subtle shift of my head from Placido's right shoulder to Placido's left shoulder. Don't go across the body, go forward across the body. Okay, so when I come in and make that first grip, that's how I do it. Okay, it's that subtle change in head position from Placido's chest line on the right hand side to Placido's shoulder line on the left hand side of Placido. Okay, so once again, high hip, watch my head. It's currently in front of Placido's right shoulder. When I make the surf, it changes to above the left shoulder. Okay, now let's put that into the 2-on-1 position that we've been talking about. Here we are, body lock situation. I pinch with the knee, I bring my leg back, and then from here, I high hip, and off the high hip, watch my head, and comes forward. From another angle, and in this way, you can combine the high hip method of body lock guard passing with one of our strongest body lock passing positions, the double shin situation. If you've watched my students perform body lock guard passing, I'm sure many of you picked up on something which is, it's difficult to ignore when you see them working. And that's the idea that as they complete the pass, they will very often attempt to step directly over into the mounted position. This is a deliberate policy on our part, and I'll explain it in this particular part of the video. Understand, guys, that passing your opponent's guard is a wonderful thing, but passing your opponent's guard and getting mounted is twice as wonderful, because there you get 3 points for the guard pass and you get 4 points for the mounted position as well. You end up in a position where you can go directly on the attack in ways that we'll look at in subsequent videos, which rack up huge numbers of points. They literally more than double the points you would score for the guard pass, and this can be done at almost no additional work and no additional risk. So it's almost always worth doing. It also works out to be mechanically very, very efficient because of the very use of body locking. Let's have a look at it now. Placido is in front of me. I'm going to demonstrate this one, guys, out of the high hip method, since we've been working on that in the last few sections, and it flows on particularly well from high hip passing because it goes with the more speedy method of guard passing, the high hip method, rather than the slower, more controlling method of forcing the knee down towards the mat. So Placido's working here in front of me. And from here, we go into that standard high hip, where I take my knee over my training partner's knee. I take the high hip position. Okay, reminding you guys that the high hip position, the high hip position is one where we have our body lock in place. I bring my knee to his tailbone and I go high hip, just like so. So that you get in this weird position like a dog pissing on a tree and go over your training partner's knee. So, once again, we're out here playing guard position. From the initial guard position, I see waist exposure. I go through, I get my hands to the lower back, pull, and then I get to my body lock. Now from here, my knee comes in, I go high hip, and then from here, my head position changes, and we step right across our training partner like so. Now, from here, you can fully expect your opponent to go into a defensive reaction where they start framing and bringing their hips out and look to put you back in guard. Okay? Now, the good news is you've got a body lock. So when they go to do this, it's exceptionally difficult. The body lock really makes it hard for them. And in addition, I can always just take my foot to my own foot. And when he goes to put me back in guard, his knees point towards me. And there's no reason why I can't just step over his body. My head goes to the opposite side and my hand comes out. The minute I step over, my hands unlock. So that when I go to recover into the mount, my hands are already open. If I land with a body lock and Placido bridges, he might conceivably take me over. So as soon as my foot hits the floor, my hand's out. So he goes to bridge, and you're locked up with your feet in a good mounted position. So once again, we're here in front of a training partner. As we go to play from guard position, we lock. My knee comes in. I go into the high hip position, and I go over. I see Placido trying to scoot out. From here, my foot comes in and my head goes over his shoulder. And as a result, I can high step over. The second my feet land on the floor, my feet tuck underneath his body and my hand comes out wide for base. Now as he goes to recover, we're mounted. Again, from an initial start position, we play guard, working. And we're mounted. And in this way, you can often get a wonderful double score. Understand that when your opponent goes to shrimp away, he's limited by the elbow, locked in on that body lock. So he has to turn his knees to face you. What happens when this occurs? Placido, you're back to the camera. Lying down. When Placido goes to shrimp out, watch his knees. The knees go low, so that the barrier for your step over to mount is negligible. This is compounded by the fact that I have a body lock. So that when Placido goes to shrimp, he can't move very far. He can only move as far as my elbow, which is not far at all. All I have to do is bring my head forward. Don't try and do it with your head in front of his bicep. Your opponent can cross-face you and cause all kinds of problems. Do it with your head over the shoulder. Now, when Placido goes to shrimp, he gives me that step. All that's required now is for my hand to come out and my feet to touch. So that when my feet touch together, I'm hooked into the hips.
when he goes to take me over, it's so difficult with the high hands locked to the hips, etc. So just one more time, Placido.
Yes, sir.
We're here working from guard position. We'll take it from the 3/4 angle. As we go out to work, from here, I see waist exposure. And we're in place. And in this way, you can double your score every time you go into body lock situations. Understand that your opponent's primary first defensive move, the shrimp, is severely limited by your body lock. And whenever he goes to attempt it, his knees will turn and face you. That will take his knees from a barrier so high down to half the height. It makes step overs into mount extremely easy. Now, we've been through a ton of material on body lock guard passing, and I'm sure you're excited to try this out on the mats as soon as you get a chance. When you go to try it out on the mats, you're very possibly going to run into the single most common error that I see as a coach when people first start their body lock guard passing journey. The good news is this error is very easy to fix, but if you don't fix it, it can lead to some very bad results. Okay, first, what is the error? Do you remember, guys, that we're couching the whole idea of body lock guard passing in terms of a lead leg and a trail leg? Let's quickly go over that again. Okay, whenever Placido is the defensive man, he presents two knees to me, and my head is on a given side. Currently, it's going to be on Placido's right-hand side. That means I need to step over Placido's right knee. Okay, that's the hurdle over which I must go. We know that there are two philosophies of doing so. I can either make the knee lower, or I can make my hip higher. I'm going to demonstrate this out of the high hip method, okay? But you can do this out of any body lock guard passing method that we've seen. Okay, once I get to a situation where I can start stepping over the knee, the lead leg is the one that steps over, okay? When my head comes up and I push with this leg, it creates a trail leg behind me. And it's the trail leg which completes the pass. Just like so. Okay? So as the name implies, lead leg first, trail leg second. Your whole thing in body lock guard passing, in the vast majority of cases, the only exception to this are the few times you use a knee drive, is to take your lead leg and go over your opponent's knee, either by making the knee lower or your hip higher. That creates a scenario where now you have to pass the trail leg. The lead leg, that's easy. Getting the trail leg to pass, that's the hard part. Okay? Now, this is where things get interesting. When people first start doing this, they say, okay, the lead leg, I got that. I step over his knee, I got it. I see the two philosophies, that's easy. But when it's time to make the trail leg catch up and pass, that's where the problem comes. This problem is so widespread and so natural to make that as a coach, it makes me want to tear my hair out every time I see this. Oh wait, my hair already fell out. From a situation like this, I come forward and step. There's the lead leg. Now, head shifts, trail leg. The most common mistake, guys back step. And then Placido follows me, and you end up getting rolled through. Okay? I'll do this one solo, Placido. Don't backstep, please. It's the most common error. It's entirely avoidable and unnecessary. Doesn't work, not effective. People lock up, high hip, step over, and they backstep. Now you have no base behind you because your hands are in a body lock. Any bridge on his part will put you on your back. Okay? So, I'm just going to demonstrate the mistake one time. What it looks like in training. Guys usually learn the lead leg pretty well. Most people do this very well. And then they make a screw up doing this kind of thing. Okay? So, if backstepping is the huge mistake, what should we be doing? Well, as you probably guessed by now, you scissor the legs. Land with your pelvis flush down to the mat. Don't land with your hips facing up to the ceiling.
you're condemning yourself to failure every time you do this, okay? So what should I be doing? The most desirable way to do it is this. I step and I focus on bringing my head forward, up here, to the shoulder, so that when I move, my pelvis faces down. And as a result, I can easily put my knee to the tailbone, as opposed to backstepping when my pelvis faces the ceiling and getting rolled straight on through. Okay? You must avoid the natural temptation, and it is a natural temptation. Most people naturally backstep because it feels like you're going to move further. It feels like your trail leg does a better job of passing. It feels perfectly natural, and it's a disaster. Okay? So, here we are. I come across, I make the move, and I just land. Hips down, like this. Never backstepping hips up. When I land in positions like this, when my opponent goes to bridge, it's not going anywhere. I'm flush, I'm stable here. And I can easily get my, let's rotate around. I can easily get my knee to that critical position at the tailbone. So that when he goes to shrimp, he's caught between my knee and my elbow and stuck down on the mat. Okay? We'll demonstrate it with our butts to the camera. So, body lock situation. We come through, and I finish here. Pelvis down. Never here. Pelvis up. That's my finish position. Okay? Now, if you're ever having a hard time scissoring your legs, and it might be because Placido has what we call a sticky hook, where his butterfly hook is very persistent and sticks inside my thigh. If you ever see this and you feel that scissoring the legs is not enough, it is okay to sit through, but never towards his legs, always towards his head. The one time it's permissible to land on your hip is when your hips face forward, never backwards. Remember guys, when my hips face backwards, it's an easy roll through. Here, my hips face his legs, I get rolled through. If I'm gonna face my hips to the floor, I face them forwards towards his head. Okay? When he goes to roll me through now, not going anywhere, it's impossible. But I won't stay here, I'll come back up and put my knee on his tailbone. Okay? So when you watch my students in competition, remember guys, when my students go out to fight, they're fighting the guys who are the best in the world. So passing these guys, it's not easy. Okay, it's not the first time someone's tried a body lock on these guys. So sometimes you've got to go a little bit of the extra distance to remove that sticky hook. Plus, first let's just show them what a sticky hook looks like. We'll rotate. Okay, watch Placido's left foot. Placido is persistent with the hook, and when I go to step, he hooks into my body, and it's like, fuck, I can't just scissor off. Okay? When I see this, I will kick through in a forwards direction. I bring my foot up to my own buttocks, and I land on my hip this way, and just step over his legs. So when he goes to shrimp or bridge or do any of those things, it feels heavy as hell.
Yeah, it does.
Then I just sweep my knee up to his tailbone, and there's my pass. Okay? Let's do it again, Placido.
Yes, sir.
So, we're here, we're engaged in the classic body lock passing situation. I go in, I get to my initial body lock, and from here I come around, I get the high hip position, my head comes forward, and then from here I'm stuck up on a sticky hook. Okay? Can't make it just by scissoring. So from here, I'm just going to push off his body, and as a result, I can just sit down over his knee. My hips face forward. I've got to beat Placido's knee. He wants to bring the knee up to the ceiling and put me back in guard. That's what he wants. So what do? I step. When he goes to point the knee forward, I'm literally sitting on top of it. Then I just come around the corner, walk everything back, and pin. Okay? Sometimes, for you younger, more athletic fellas, you will come right off his sticky hook. Looks like this. I go over the top, and you just throw right over the top and land. Okay, he goes to put me back in guard.
and we pin. Okay, that's the more desirable option. But whether you land on his knee or in front of his knee, they're both going to get you past. Okay, I'm going to demonstrate this a few times so you get to see what it looks like in a more lively situation. Okay, so we're working from in here. I go in, I get into my body lock, step in over the top. There's the high hip position, and then from here, I just throw, step, and pin. And pin. Okay. One more time, the most common mistake, the thing we're going to avoid as much as possible. It's a natural mistake to make, but we can't let that be an excuse. I step over and I face this way, back stepping, and get rolled on through. Okay? Unacceptable. If we are going to sit through, it's never towards our opponent's legs off a body lock, it's always towards the head. So, when we come through, that's the way I want to go. And then always recovering back to a square position. So there you have it, the most common failure associated with body lock guard passing, what it is, and how to avoid it. We're looking at the idea of body lock guard passing. Sometimes people ask me, okay, you show all these methods of body lock. I see your students using all these methods of body lock. What's your favorite method of body lock guard passing? My answer is always the same. I personally strongly favor the method I'm about to show you. All the methods that we use, you've seen my students using them very successfully. They're great methods, but me personally, this was always my favorite. And that's to switch from a lock of the lumbar region, the lower back, that's the classic body lock that most people think of, to a high lock, which controls the shoulder line. So essentially what I do is I make a transition from controlling the waistline to the shoulder line. So it involves two separate body locks. Each one has very different properties. And it's my belief that by switching the properties of one to the other, you truly maximize guard passing potential. First, you might be asking, what the hell is a body lock and what the hell is a high lock? Let's have a look at it right now. We'll do this in standing position, so people can see what we're talking about. Okay, a lumbar lock, as the name implies, refers to any body lock situation where I control the lumbar region of the body. Okay, so I lock up on a training partner and step in, just like so. I'm controlling the lumbar regions. Okay, if Placido tries to walk his hips back, it's difficult because the lumbar controls the hips and lower back. Okay, so that would be a classic control of the lumbar region. The problem associated with lumbar locks is that opponents, if they do get their hips back and away, my grip ends up breaking. Okay, because the grip is located at the lumbar region. Now, if I control it and I step in and I get genuine control of my training partner's lumbar region, it's a winning grip. But if I fail to control it and my opponent's hips goes back, the grip breaks. Okay. Now, let's contrast that with a high lock. In a high lock, I come in underneath the armpits and I lock up here at my training partner's back of neck, just like so. So when he goes to sprawl his hips back, it doesn't compromise the lock. Lumbar lock, he sprawls the hips back, it compromises the lock. Here, he sprawls the hips back, nothing is compromised. Okay? This lock, the high lock, controls the elbows. When he tries to bring the elbows down, very difficult. The lumbar lock, he brings the elbows down over my elbows, breaks my grip. So the lumbar lock does nothing to control the elbows. It does a superb job of controlling the lumbar region if I can get good hip position relative to his. Okay? The beauty of the high lock is that when he goes to sprawl the hips back, I can hold very, very easily. The grip never gets compromised. And it controls the elbows and the shoulder line. So the high lock controls the shoulder line. He goes to bring the elbows and shoulders down, and you've got excellent control. The lumbar lock controls the waistline and the hips. Okay? So the area of focus is completely different. The weaknesses of one can be covered by the other. Now,
When you first go into body lock someone, you want to control their hips. Why? Because the whole guard position is centered around hip movement, lateral hip movement, forward shifts, lateral movements left and right, shrimping, etc., etc. Okay? So when I first go in on someone, they're seated butterfly guard. My whole thing is to control the lumbar region so that the hips are controlled. The hips are the focus of guard position. So as we play in this position, I go in and I get to the hips. Hip grip at the lumbar region shuts down lateral movement. He goes to move. It's tough. Okay? Now, once I start that high leg action that gets me lead leg over, and we settle down. Now, I play a waiting game with my hands open or locked. I leave that up to you. They're both good alternatives. Let's change our position, please. So I can have my hands open or I can keep the lock. I leave that up to you. Now, as Placido goes to play in this position, there's going to be times where you see vulnerability, where your hand can punch through. Then my head goes over and my hands lock all the way up here by the neck. So that when Placido goes to play guard position, his elbows are locked out of position. To be effective from bottom half guard, he would prefer to have his elbows by his sides so he can form underhook, so take me out of balance. But if I'm underneath here, when he goes to play that game, he can't even get it started. And because my hands are locked, it's very, very hard for him to recover. And it becomes very easy for me, on the other hand, to start actions of pommeling my legs and going up into very, very powerful passing positions. So my favorite gambit is to use the waist lock to pass over one of my training partner's knees and then play a waiting game to see an opportunity to transfer from a lumbar lock to the high lock. Once I use that, then I just go into all my classic guard passes out of the lumbar lock, double underhooks with my hands locked. And as a result, you maximize the worth of both locking positions. When you first want to control the hips, you use your lumbar lock. Once you've done that and stepped over your opponent's leg, now you make a switch to the high lock. And now you control the head, shoulders, and elbows. That second body lock, the high lock, is almost impossible to break. It's a phenomenally strong grip. For your opponent to break it is absolute hell. And it's an incredibly useful passing grip because you can switch your head position at will and pass on both sides of your opponent's body. What I'm going to do now is just demonstrate a few movements of it so you can just get a general sense of what I'm trying to accomplish, okay? Periodically, I'll just verbalize what I'm trying to do, and you'll get a sense of how this methodology works in two distinct phases based around two distinct grips. So here we are. We're playing in guard situation. My training partner's in seated guard. From here, I see waist exposure. I go and I get my hands to the body, and then I go and I get my initial grip. Now, from here, I start by going over my training partner's knee, just like so. From here, I play a waiting game. I can have my hands locked. I can have my hands open. In the hurly-burly of action, I see an opportunity to pommel through and get my hands into the high lock position. As soon as my hands go high locking, my whole thing is to bring my head up. And then I start playing like so. As Placido goes to move me around, And in this way, you can see that quick transition from lumbar lock to high lock represents one of the best ways to use two locks to control two parts of the body. The waistline first, in order to step over the knee, and the shoulder line and the head in order to control the eventual pass. We're looking at troubleshooting with regards to body locking. We've seen what to do when opponents won't let us step over a knee. We go knee cutting. We've seen situations where our opponent had a butterfly hook and tried to sweep us. And we saw the idea of kicking out of the sweep and landing across side. Now let's look at a very common form of counter. This is a forward shift. This comes generally from our more experienced opponents who understand that what we're trying to do with a body lock is put their shoulders on the mat. So when we first go into a body lock, our whole thing, presumably he's fighting me here, is to put our opponent's shoulders on the mat, drive him down like so. Now, he knows what my intention is from here. So Placido now will go into a forward shift and return to a seated position. Because once he returns to a seated position, he has a much better chance to stand up to his feet, sweep me, go into various forms of elevations, maybe even get leg locks. It's not going to be easy because I still got a body lock, but at least he's got a better chance. So this is definitely one of the more common forms of counter. It's a good counter. So we've got to know how to deal with it. Please understand that the forward shift is a very strong form of hold or movement, sorry. But like any move, it has its weaknesses. Okay, and in this case, it's what we call outside knee exposure. Now, you've heard me refer to outside knee exposure on several occasions in this video. This is the idea that all forms of guard position are predicated on the idea of the inside of the knees controlling either my torso or one of my legs. Okay, every form of guard is predicated on this idea. No form of guard is predicated on the idea of having no knees in front or around an opponent. Okay, this is not an effective form of guard. The whole idea of guard is to trap something between the knees. Okay, so if you can generate exposure of the outside of the knee and keep pressure on it, you are essentially killing guard play. Your opponent has to react by creating space and then recovering his knees around you. It's the only thing you can do. But if you have a body lock, it's hard for him to go backwards. Okay, so typically what we find in these situations is opponents
hit their forward shift. If I stay on the body lock, now he's in a good position. Now, most people, when they hit a body lock, have a natural and understandable tendency to hold on to it for dear life. You know, it took you some effort to get it, right? So you don't just want to give it up. You can't be like that. When you're in a forward shift situation, let go of your body lock and generate outside knee exposure. Don't think, oh, I've got a body lock, I can never let go of it. A body lock's a great weapon, but like any weapon, it has its limitations. Okay, the lock of your hands is not as strong as his forward shift, which involves his legs and his hips and his entire upper body. Okay, don't try to match your hands against his legs. It's a losing gambit. Unlock your body lock and use a forearm to send his knees by and generate outside knee exposure. Looks like this. I put him down. As Placido goes into a forward shift, I just let it happen. I just sweep the knees by him. Now, my chest is on the outside of his knee. You've gotten outside knee exposure. As soon as you do this, go in and get to your tight waist, and if you want, lock up an even better form of body lock, which is the side body lock. Make sure when you do this, don't give him space to just bring his knee back where it came from. You've done a good move. Keep it there. So sweep your knee behind his knee and put the other leg up. So you find yourself in a situation now where you have a side body lock. You just went from a good front body lock to a great side body lock. Side body lock's always preferred over a front body lock. When Placido goes to work in a position like this, it's awfully, awfully difficult. Okay? Guys, as much as we like front body locks, side body locks are even better. We're going to be looking in some detail at side body locks shortly, but this is your first introduction to them. Okay? Don't hold on to a front body lock for dear life when there's a better side body lock right there in front of you if you just perform this simple move. So here, I'm in a front body lock. Presumably he's working. Don't sit up. We're working here from guard. I touch his shoulders on the mat. Boom. Placido's like, nope, that's not what I want. And he immediately goes into a forward shift. And we immediately go into a shuck that puts his knees in a poor position and generates outside knee exposure. Immediately, I come in and I knee sweep. My knee goes across. So when he tries to bring his knees back in,
Impossible.
very difficult. As he tries to build base, I want to constantly circle his shoulders to the mat and stay over his knees. Okay? Don't worry, I'll be showing you how to deal or how to pass from a side body lock soon, but for now, just countering the forward shift. So, he's got his hands on me, presumably. Presumably his hips are back. Hips back. And we're playing from here. We pull the hips in. He goes into a forward shift. And there's your counter. Seen from another angle. We put him down. And you've transitioned from front body lock to side body lock. This is a very, very effective way of countering one of the most common problems associated with body lock guard passing, the forward shift. Going from a good front body lock to a great side body lock. Now, we're working our way through body lock guard passing. It's very important now you understand the relationship between tight waist passing and body lock passing. I'm not sure how familiar you are with my students, but if any of you are familiar with George St. Pierre, he was, of course, one of the greatest mixed martial artists of all time, and a big part of my early days in coaching was preparing him from being a youngster all the way through the maturity of his career in grappling for mixed martial arts. Now, George was well known for his ability to pass open guards and half guards in mixed martial arts. If you ever watch him in his guard passing, you'll notice there's a very fundamental difference, even if you factor in all the striking, between his guard passing method from open guard versus my grappling students in the squad. What you'll notice is that when my grappling students work against a seated butterfly guard, They typically work out of body locks. But when you watch George work, you almost invariably see him working with a tight waist. His hands are not locked. He works with one arm around and one hand free on the floor as an action hand. Okay? Now, it's a natural question for you guys to be asking, why the difference? Why wasn't George St. Pierre using body locks back in the day? A big part of it is because, of course, George is engaged in a very different sport, mixed martial arts. And when you're grappling on the ground, there is both opportunity and indeed necessity to be punching people. If you just hold on to people, the referee might see that as passivity and stand you up. So you have to be active with your hands. Tight waist passing enables us to flatten an opponent down and from here engage in strike, and you have a free hand. If my hands are locked, that means I simply can't punch. Okay, so that's the first danger. The second element is that very often the guard passes in mixed martial arts come immediately after a takedown, like takedown, half guard pass. Okay, so that when you land with momentum from standing position, very often there's a necessity to have hands out for base. And if I just land with a body lock, you can often get overturned right off the takedown. There's too much momentum coming down from standing position. So very often what I would do is, as they come down to the floor, I would counsel George to land with a hand open, like so. Okay? Now, forgetting about those differences between mixed martial arts, where there's a need to punch and a need to be able to control the aftermath of a takedown, there's still reasons why you should know how to engage in tight waist passing as opposed to body lock passing, even in a pure grappling sport. And if you actually watch closely with my best students, you will see them body lock, but if you look a little more closely, you will often see them, whenever the things get heated down on the floor, they will switch from body lock to tight waist and back again. What I want to do is counsel you away from getting body locks and just holding on for dear life every single time. Sometimes you just get a body lock and you stay with it. If your opponent's maybe not so good and you don't unlock your hands at all, there's no necessity to unlock your hands. But don't think that once your hands are locked, they have to stay locked no matter what. That's not the mindset I want you having. Use your body lock for profit, but when it no longer seems profitable to you, don't be afraid to switch to a tight waist. And please, don't think that just because you switch to a tight waist, you can't go right back to a body lock should the situation demand it. What I want you to do is to be flexible with your body locks. Use them when they're appropriate, and then switch to a tight waist when they're not. And then if it becomes appropriate again, go back to your body lock and play between the two. Don't have a single track mind where it's like, I'm either tight waist or I'm body lock and there's no mixing of the two. Absolutely not. Use them together. That's why I personally am a big fan of long arm, short arm body locks. Okay, I know a lot of people like to lock them in the middle. Nothing wrong with that. It's very effective. But I personally prefer long arm, short arm when I can. Why? Because long arm, short arm enables me to switch back and forth between body lock and tight waist. If my hands are directly behind him and get caught on the floor, I'm kind of stuck now. Okay, and if I unlock it, it's hard for me to relock it. Okay, so that's why I typically prefer long arm, short arm. Not always, but typically. Okay, so that my hand is through. And if there's ever a time, let's say Placido, for example, blocks my knee. Okay, if there's ever a time where I use an opening from my body lock to strip and push, and then from here I go right back into the body lock. It gives you more flexibility. Okay, so my general counsel to you is understand that tight waist and body lock are very closely related. And whenever you have one, you always have the other, particularly when you favor long arm, short arm grips. Please don't get into a single track mind where you're either a tight waist guy or you're a body lock guy. No, use them both together. And you can often go between them several times in the course of a single guard pass. You don't always have to. Sometimes you just get the body lock and just pass right from there. Sometimes you just get the tight waist and just pass right from there. But as the action gets heated against better and better opponents, you often have to switch back and forth. Gordon Ryan is a very, very good example of this. You'll often see him making these switches.
Okay, so let's have a look now at how this might look and what are the pros and cons of a tight waist versus a body lock. Okay, I personally, for most of the time that I grappled actively, would go between body locking and tight waisting. That was always my thing. So let's say we start with the body lock. The body lock is best for pulling people in. A tight waist is not very good for pulling people in. Okay, so if your hips are back, the body lock is king for that. If someone goes to stand up on you, the body lock is king. Okay, because it's just so much control of the hips. It's just tough to get away. The great advantage, go and get active. Put your hands on me. The great advantage of tight waist is extra base of support. Okay, if he goes to lift me in this direction, it's an extra base of support. Okay, the other great advantage, it gives you a better ability to lower his knee by putting your hand on his hip and your knee inside, your elbow inside his knee, make a strong leg. And this makes it very easy to push and go over the top. Okay, so sometimes when my hands are locked, it can be tough to get my elbow inside. Put your knee high. It can be tough to get my elbow inside. And then when I try to step over, it's like, oh my God, I'll never get over his knee. So I unlock and I put my elbow inside his knee. Now he tries to keep his knee high, and it's just so much easier. It's almost like performing an elbow escape upside down. There's my tight waist in place. Okay, I'm open. Look how I just use my elbow inside. Try to hold it off. Nope. And there it is. Okay, so if you're ever having a struggle getting over your training partner's knee, I always recommend switch to a tight waist. It's easier. You got more mobility. If you've got a guy underneath you who's trying to herky-jerky you over and sweep you, open your hands, put your hand out, use it for base. If the guy's posting on your knee, strip it off. Now you've got an active hand that can move wherever you want. You lose a little bit of hip control, a little bit, but not much. The body lock is more important when you're first putting them down. That's where the body lock is so advantageous. Okay? It's actually quite hard to put them down just with a tight waist. They can scoot and cause all kinds of problems. But the body lock just holds him down. But once his back touches the ground, let friction on the mat work for you. Okay, he goes to move, even with one hand. Dude, it's not easy. The tight waist is held in place not by my grip, but by his body and the friction with the mat. Especially when you've got a glove on in mixed martial arts. It feels like a block or wedge underneath your lower back. Okay? So we just come in like so. Now, here's my body lock. He goes to move me around. I've got a body lock. Good move. Body lock's tight. Here's my tight waist. I go over the knee. Back to my body lock. He brings his knee back in. And you see how you just play them back and forth against each other. Guys, don't get into a single track mind where you think, I'm a body lock guy and once my hands lock, I'll never unlock them. Nope, wrong way to think. Don't be like, I don't like body locks. I don't feel very stable with them. I prefer my tight waist. That's also a very limiting way to think. Use them together. They've both got good points and bad points about them. They're both very strong in some ways and not so strong in others. Okay? Don't think because your hands unlock, you can't go right back to it. Don't think because you started here, you can't just go in and lock your hands. It doesn't take a lot to go from here to here, especially when you use the long arm, short arm method of gripping. Use them both and you'll find your guard passing percentages go up a lot. We're going through the idea of a tight waist. We've seen that one arm goes long around our training partner's arm and our second hand is free as an action hand. We can post inside our training partner's knee, post on the floor, grab his hands. In a mixed martial arts fight, you could punch with it, do all kinds of things. As a result, you have more versatility than you have with a body lock. But you're trading versatility for strength of grip and control of hips. So that's the basic trade-off here. Body lock does a better job of controlling the hips than anything else. Tight waist does a pretty good job of controlling the hips and gives you much greater versatility with the other hand. So there's your trade-off. One of the best ways for us to work between a body lock and a tight waist is to use a switching tight waist, where everything looks like you're going to pass on the right hand side, then use a switching tight waist and pass on the left hand side. Okay, so this goes in tune with one of our core squad philosophies of guard passing, that we should always be able to threaten guard passes both left and right. And the dual threat of switching from one side to the other makes you a radically more effective guard passer. If your opponent only has to defend one side, it's pretty easy. But when they've got to cover everything, it's damn hard. So we have an opponent in front of us. From here, we do a good job of putting his shoulders down to the mat. Once we're there, we go through our standard methodology of going over a training partner's knee. Once we get over the knee, we go through our standard methodology of switching the head, and we notice our opponent is interested in any form of basic elbow escape or just movement in general. Can you see what's happening when Placido goes to move? His shoulders start coming off the mat. Once the shoulders come off the mat, it becomes relatively easy for us to pass and switch our hands. Going back a step, when I started with right arm long. Right arm long. When I see him curl towards me for an elbow escape, I pass my second hand through and I go left hand long. So I've switched my long arm. Okay. Now I take my other hand out and we have a tight waist grip with the left arm instead of the right. I use my shoulder to return Placido to the mat. From here, presumably he's bringing his arms in to defend himself. We start bringing our head down to the floor, just like so. And from here, my foot comes up, come make a strong body. My foot comes up inside his leg. And from this position, as he tries to hold me off, it's very easy for me to use the balance of my head, hand, and tight waist to control his hips and movement. As he tries to move me around, it's very easy for us to step in over the top and then pass in any given direction. I can pass left, I can pass to the mount, or I can pass right. Because you can threaten in all three different directions, it's going to be very hard for your opponent to stop you. Let's have a look at this from a different angle. We come in and put his shoulders down on the mat. From here, we start that initial action of stepping over the knee. Now, Placido just stays flat on his back with two shoulders on the mat. We just use any one of the passes that we've looked at so far. Most of the time, your opponent's interested in coming up. Even if only a single shoulder comes off the mat, it's pretty easy now to punch through. Then I switch my head to the other side. From here, as he goes to address the new threat on the other side, presumably he's got his arm in front. It would make no sense whatsoever to have his arm here. We come up and turn in. Now, as I start walking, I've got that action hand of a tight waist. I put my hand inside the elbow strong. And from here, I start walking across his body and I focus on getting my foot over his knee. From here, as we come forward, we can pass in any given direction we want. Here I'm choosing to pass to my right. You could pass directly into mount, or you could come across to the left. Let's see it from another angle. Here we start with a body lock. From this position, we get over that first knee. From here, now I take my hand and punch through. So I start with right arm long, now I go left arm long. Now I flatten him out. I come forward, place my hand inside and strong.
Yep. And start stepping over my training partner's knee. Once we're there, we're in a good position to start our various passing directions. Okay. This is a very, very effective way of taking tight weights passing and getting it moving in multiple directions, one of the guiding principles of our passing philosophy. Don't be satisfied with always passing to one side. Whenever you can change direction, you essentially render all of your opponent's defenses on one side null and void and force him to switch all his defenses to the other. And in that time, it's a good time for you to pass.
Now, we've been through an awful lot of front body lock material, but along the way, we specified that there was another form of body lock which was inherently superior to front body locks. It's not as common because typically your opponents are very afraid of this position occurring, so they fight it very hard. But if it does occur, it's highly desirable. Now, first, what is a side body lock? Okay, a front body lock occurs anytime someone has their knees around me. Okay, so this would be a good example of a form of front body lock. Even if he took his leg over my back, this too, his knees are around me. Okay, even if I had the most desirable form, here, still, his knees are around me. So the commonality of all front body locks are his knees are around me. A side body lock refers to a situation where neither of his knees are around me. On the contrary, I have exposed the outside of his knee and I am capable of putting a pushing force on the knee. Okay? If Placido was not allowed to move his hips, he just had to stay right there, and I put a pushing force on his knee, if he goes to put me back in guard, it's very, very difficult. Okay? The only thing that enables him to put me back in guard is to move backwards. And now he can put me back in guard. Okay? The beauty of a side body lock is the body lock prevents him moving backwards. Okay? So if I lock this position and he goes to put me back in guard, it's extremely difficult. Okay? It's very, very tough. So if you can get this position, it's money in the bank. Of course, your opponent's going to make it difficult, so we're going to have some specific methods of getting to the position. Okay? Let's have a look at a couple now. From a situation where there's a little bit of distance between us and we're playing from butterfly guard, all I'm going to do is I'm just going to place one hand inside my training partner's knee. Look what happens when I push Placido's right knee to the mat. Watch this knee. Inevitably, it comes up towards the center line. As I push one knee to the floor, inevitably, the second one follows. Okay? What I'm going to do is I'm going to post inside the knee here. Move your hands. And I'm going to put my second hand like this on his knee. So one hand goes here and one hand goes here. Let's change the angle a little bit. So one hand goes here, thumb pointing down. Second hand goes here, thumb pointing out. So this is outward thumb, downward thumb. Okay? Now, as we play, wake up. We're playing here from butterfly guard. I go in and I get my grips in place. As soon as I feel his knee touch the mat, I just pop up, boom. So all my weight is on my hands. Because all my weight is on my hands, my legs feel light. And as a result, even an old cripple like me can move pretty quickly. I rise, don't try and do it from down here, you won't be able to get good grips. So as we play, I rise. Then in one motion, boom. Then all I do is I just take my knee and I knee slide under his knee. Now the hands come in and we get to our lock. Okay? Now, let's check something out here. Some of you are going to like the idea of an ultra tight lock. It feels awesome. I'm not going to lie, I like this grip a lot. Okay? It's very, very tight. It doesn't have to be that way, however. I don't have to go wrist to wrist for maximum tightness. You can also go with a looser grip, 10 finger, but a tighter elbow position inside the hip. So when he goes to move, even though my grip is looser, my elbow position is tighter. And it joins my elbow and knee and forms a very tight structure.
Okay, so I either go elbow over for a tighter grip. He goes to move. So that's tight because of my grip. One form of tightness. If for whatever reason you don't like that kind of grip and you prefer 10 fingers, now you got a looser grip, but you can get a tighter elbow position. He goes to move, and both will lock him in place. Okay, so that's the difference in your grips. So let's have a look at entering again. So we're working here, butterfly guard, hand fight, then the hands go onto the knees.
Feel locked down.
And we're in a good position to attack. So that's one very effective means of operating. Okay. Second method. That's my favorite method. Second method, sometimes when you play, you get his hands preoccupied, you get your knee on the outside of his knee. And he doesn't really notice it because you're doing a good job of distracting motion, etc. Then you just knee sweep. And there's your side body lock, and down to the floor you go. Okay, so in these cases, I take outside knee position. My knee brushes his knee to the center line. Then I just bring my elbows down. My head goes to the front deltoid, as it always does for body locks. And as we play this position, you just go in with your hands and lock. Now, this method will only work if his knees are a certain distance off the mat. If he's flexible and his knees are right down by the floor, forget this method. Okay? So when people are very flexible and their knees go all the way down, I recommend posting. Okay? And using this method. When they're less flexible and the knees are higher, typically what I'll do is I'll just knee bump right across and play from here. Okay? Now, a shucking method is also pretty effective. From a situation where we're playing down on the mat, I'll just take a forearm and I'll just bump the knee on by. Okay, so when he goes to scoot back, you get to your side body lock. He goes to move. And it's a very difficult thing. Okay? Now, another method which I often make use of is from standing. From a situation where my opponent's in front of me and his feet are up, very often from in here, we'll just catch our training partner's ankle and I'll just hit a simple throw by, nothing crazy, just a little throw by. And as a result, you're past his knees. Now, what a lot of your opponents do is this kind of thing. They come up and there's waist exposure. Okay? So we come in on a training partner, and as we play from here, I hit that throw by. I put my head on the inside of this frame. Don't go outside, make a strong body. Mm-hmm. That's where he's strong. I can't go that way. Okay, strong. Mm-hmm. But when I bring my head to the inside, we go right in and put him down. Now, it's true, this one is predicated on his response. If he stays with his back on the ground, can't do this move. Okay? But the good news is, if he stays with his back on the ground and you throw by, you're in a pretty good position to start passing all the passes we saw earlier with throw bys. Okay? So it's a very, very common thing against a supine opponent. From here, we start coming in and then we see this. Head goes to the inside and we lock. He goes to get back up. And down they go. Okay? So those are some of my favorite and most effective ways to get to the side body lock. Now we're working our way through the side body lock, the most mechanically and tactically efficient and effective of all the body lock guard passes, but also the hardest one to get into. So even though it's the best, you don't run into it so often. So it's always something we're looking for, but understand from the start that most of your work in body lock guard passing will be done out of front body locks. Now, there's a subject that I want to cover now, which is extremely important for your side body lock, but it's a tricky one to teach because
there's not really a move per se that I'm going to teach you here. It's just a concept. The concept can be stated very simply. Leg riding out of a side body lock is the action of staying over our opponent's legs and pinning his legs with our legs. Please understand that leg riding in grappling usually has a very different meaning. In the sport of wrestling, leg riding typically means putting your hooks in. So in jiu-jitsu, we call it putting your hooks in the rear mounted position. In wrestling, that's what leg riding refers to. In jiu-jitsu, leg riding is very different, kettle of fish, where it refers to situations where you're passing someone's guard and you literally put your legs and shins on top of their shins, knees, and thighs, so that you're literally riding on top of their legs in ways where they can't manipulate you with their guard position. Please understand, guys, that guard position, as we've noted on several occasions in this video, is built upon the idea that my opponent controls me between his knees. Every guard position is built on this fundamental idea that either he controls my torso between his knees, or he controls my legs between his knees. Okay, in this case, one of my legs. Okay, now, leg riding refers to situations where you are literally on the outside of his legs and riding on top of them with your body weight, so that when he tries to put me back in guard, his legs are all smashed up together. Okay, you don't have to have your shin. That's just one good possibility. You can also ride over the top with hamstrings. Here, you can back heel and lock them in. You're still riding on top of his legs. So when he goes to use his guard, no part of my body is between his knees. So technically, this is not really a guard at all. It's not an effective guard. Okay, I haven't passed his guard to score points yet, but realistically, a guard is only useful when some part of my body is caught between his knees. Here, no part of my body is caught between his knees. Here, no part of my body is caught between his knees. Here, no part of my body is caught between his knees. So these are all examples of leg riding. When Placido tries to launch any form of effective attack or offense from situations like this, go.
I cannot regard.
He finds to his horror that his whole guard game just goes right out the window. Okay, so technically I haven't passed his guard, I haven't gone past the hip line and established head control, but his guard is damn useless from there. Okay, so leg riding is a method of negating the guard position without actually scoring points. And in a long match, negating, exhausting, tiring, and frustrating and shutting down an opponent is money in the bank. You may not score points with it immediately, but it will set up situations in the near future where you definitely will be scoring points. Okay. Now, my advice to you is, if you get into side body lock positions, ride your opponent's legs in the manner we just described. Your instincts when you get to a side body lock will be get to his back, because there is back exposure. You are halfway to his back after all. And so the temptation in a side body lock is to run around to the back. And then people just start standing up on you. No, other way. They start heisting, coming up. They start re-guarding and bringing legs back in because there's too much space. They scoot out, knees come back in, now you're back in a front body lock. All kinds of madness starts happening. Okay? My advice to you is, when you're in a side body lock, take your time and stay over his legs. That's so important, I'm going to say it again. When you're in a side body lock, don't freak out, don't get excited. Stay over his legs. Ride the legs and take your time. There's no rush. He's not going anywhere. He's in a body lock and you're sitting on top of his legs. Take your time and melt him with leg riding pressure. So once we lock in situations like this, first move I like to do is a knee sweep, where I take my outside knee and I sweep it to his inside knee. If I don't do that, there's always a danger of his knee coming inside, and now you're back in a front body lock. It's not bad, but it's not what you wanted. You kind of went down a step on the hierarchy. So I take my knee and I sweep it in towards his knees. Second step,
Step over his legs. Third step, chill the fuck out. Just relax. You're in a winning position. Okay? Now I can start playing games. Here's my first game. I take my back leg and I pommel it on top of his legs. As we play the position.
Yeah, I'm working really hard.
It's so hard for poor Placido to get anything going. And you just, man, you watch my students, you watch Gordon Ryan, Nicky Rod, they'll get this position and just melt people for 5, 6, 7 minutes until they're just like, what do I do? At no point are you in any danger because you're not in an effective form of guard. I'll say this again, the only effective forms of guard involve situations where he controls some part of my body between his knees. Either one of my legs for leg entanglements or my torso for upper body moves. If I'm not between his knees, he's got nothing. He's got nothing to attack me with, nothing to control me with. And I can just take my time. You've got his hips locked up. He's not going anywhere. Right on his legs, melt him. And then when the time is right, step into a score. This isn't a move, guys, it's a concept, but it's one of the most important ones I can ever show you. Please understand the main gambits of leg riding. First, knee sweep. If my outside knee is too far from the inside knee, even with a body lock, you can re-guard. Sweep in, so your knee is inside the crook of his knee. Step number 2, step over the legs. And then start playing a windshield wiper game where you windshield wiper legs over. You can go in any given direction. You can switch sides of the body. And lock up your training partner's legs. He's not going anywhere. Okay? You just hold and control him. We're just going to give you a light play because this is not a move. I can't really just show you, okay, here's step 1, step 2, step 3. It doesn't work that way. There's just the general concept of riding on top of his legs. I'm going to give you some basic heuristics. Okay, first heuristic, take your time. He's not going anywhere. You got a body lock and you're not between his knees. So there's no danger and he's not going anywhere. So that's your first one, take your time. Second heuristic, stay over his legs. It's tempting to run around to the side, run around to the back. I'm not going to say that can't work, but I'm going to say, relax, you can take that anytime you want. Let the guy suffer a little bit. Let him melt. Then you take his back. Life's a lot easier that way, okay? Stay over his legs. Don't get excited. 3, once you're over the legs, play around. There's different ways you can manipulate your body. The only stipulation is don't get between his knees in any meaningful way. Don't let him control your body above the knees between his legs. Okay? Now that gives you a lot of leeway in how you ride. You can ride him with your shins. You can ride him with your hamstrings. You can lock your legs like a triangle around his 2 legs. There's a lot of things you can do, and they're all damn good. Okay? So those are the broad heuristics. Now, as we play, so as we play butterfly guard, from this situation we go into an initial movement that gives us a side body lock. Okay? First thing I like to do in these situations is get my elbow inside. Now we've got the side body lock. The temptation is to run to the back, but we're going to avoid that temptation. Remember our heuristic. We're going to go over the legs. We're going to step over the legs. So I knee sweep and step over. Here, I'm between his knees, but below my knee. So it's okay. If I put my knee between his legs, he'd have half guard. Not what we're looking for. But as long as we're in situations like so, he has no effective form of control. Now we'll just play from here.
Yes, sir.
And in this way, you can completely control someone by riding on top of the legs with a side body lock. Now, we've been looking at side body lock work. We've seen how to get into a side body lock. We've seen how to leg ride from a side body lock. I said earlier that there's no specific passing method, no step 1, step 2, step 3 for side body lock. It's more about this conceptual idea of riding the legs until you get sufficient pressure that you can pass. But I am going to leave you with one simple step-by-step move for passing from side body lock, which I believe is one of the best overall. It'll give you some guidance and some general ideas about how to control the position and score points and get you upper body submissions out of it. Let's have a look at it right now. Okay, we're going to start with side body lock in place. So from a situation where I come up on my training partner and we get into side body lock, you'll notice he's almost always perched up on his elbow. Now his goal is to get from an elbow up to a hand. Okay, our goal is to get over our training partner's legs. If I drive straight towards his hand, make a strong body pass at it, I'll never put him down. I'll never put him down by driving to his base. So what I do is I push to the side and force him to an elbow, like so. So once again, I go back down to an elbow. His goal is to build up to a hand. That gives him more height and therefore more ability to scoot back and bring his knee back inside and convert to a more desirable front body lock. Okay, so that's his goal. So as he builds up, if I drive towards his hand, even though I weigh more than Placido, I'll never put him down. So I redirect and force him to an elbow. I want to get this shoulder to the mat. I can't reach his forearm. It's too far away. So I unlock my body lock, going back to the theme that don't lock and stay locked. Be prepared to open your hands. Okay, put it out. Don't be nice. Okay, I can't reach it with my right hand. So I come in and I reach with the opposite hand and I feed it to this hand. Now I take this shoulder and I drive it down to the mat. Once his shoulder touches the mat, we just elevate. When he tries to put me between his knees,
Your chest doesn't let me.
there's no way in God's green earth you can do it. From here, there are numerous ways in which you can pass. I'll show you a simple one. He tries to lift and elevate. From here, I just take my knee down here. Normally, I would be very reticent about this because of the danger of leg locks. But my opponent's right arm is trapped and pinned. So from here, I catch, step my knee, step over, lift my arm, and we're mounted. Okay? Sorry, pass it out.
Oh, it's all.
That's what happens when you get old. You get fat.
It's for the fanatics.
Oh my God. So from this position, we control. He's smart. He tries to build up off an elbow. I'm smart. I step over his legs and force his elbow to the mat. I make sure I ride the legs. So if he tries to get up, it's
not easy.
So much pressure. Now, I can't reach further. Can't reach, but I can always pass off. Now I touch the shoulder to the floor. I come up and tripod. Normally I'm kind of reticent about stepping between because of the danger of Kandi Basami. But here, I have his shoulder pinned to the mat and I have his arm. So that he literally couldn't get to my heel if he wanted to. As he hooks in, I just take my hand and step. I step again, capture, step with the knee, step over. Now we're no longer leg riding. You're no longer over his legs, you're over his torso. So you're mounted. Limp our arm,
Hand comes out, legs go in, and you've scored. Okay? Obvious question for you guys. Well, what if he didn't hook his leg into him? What do I do now? Don't worry, just literally walk up his body. If he won't hook into your leg and give you the step in, just walk up his body. So, I put him down to an elbow. From here, I put his shoulder on the mat. I tripod. This time he doesn't hook into my legs. He just stays here. Okay? Look how I just come up and I just walk my foot above his knee. So when he goes to put me in guard, there's nothing. And you just settle down into the mounted position. I'm sure on several occasions you've been watching some of my students, in particular Gordon Ryan, where sometimes the ends of the guard passes just seem like artificially easy. You're like, really? He did that to a world champion? It's because of reasons like this. You just literally ride their legs to a point where their guard becomes completely ineffective. It always goes back to that foundational principle. Guard position is only an effective mechanism when you control a meaningful part of your opponent's body between your knees. What do I mean by a meaningful part of the body? Like I'm Placido. If Placido puts my calf muscle between his knees, that's nothing. That is not a meaningful example of control. Controlling my leg below the knee means nothing, because my knee can always come through into quasi-mounted positions and make for easy escapes. If he controls my leg above the knee, this is meaningful. If he controls my leg above the knee, reverse De La Riva, this is meaningful. The foot's locked up, I'm between his knees, above the knee. If he locks half guard above my knee, this is meaningful, because he's locked above my knee. If he's locked closed guard, this is obviously meaningful, because I'm between his knees with my whole waist and torso. Butterfly guard, this is obviously meaningful, because I'm between his knees, above the waist. Okay? But if you have situations here, there's no part of my body is between his knees. Here, no meaningful part of my body is between his knees, because all of his contact is below my knee. If my knee's not controlled, there's nothing to go into quasi-mounted positions here. Okay? Once you understand this principle, you're going to understand riding legs. And once you understand riding legs, you can take that side body lock position and turn it into a veritable nightmare for your opponent.